Welcome back, Albert here. Today, we will be discussing Tar-Telperiën, the 10th ruler and second ruling queen of Numenor. Telperien was born in 1320 of the Second Age and was the daughter of Tar-Surion. Telperien's name means Silver One, or some variants of this. Perhaps she was named after the great white tree of old. There are no records of her early life, but one can assume she too was raised in Emirië in central Numenor, like the other members of her family. In 1556 SA, her father would surrender the scepter of kingship. She was the eldest child and first in line, so she became Tar-Telperiën. During her rule in Numenor, significant events took place in MiddleEarth. The creation of the 3 rings of power, the forging of the One Ring, and the war of the Elves and Sauron, not to mention an array of other events that I will get into in a future video. Now, it is said despite the ancient alliance with Elves, Tar-Telperiën did not intervene in these matters. However, I would like to paint a different picture of this, and of Tar-Telperiën. To give some context, the War of Elves and Sauron began in 1693 SA. Now, depending on your sources, Gil-galad called for aid in 1695 SA, when Sauron's forces invaded Eriador, and, if one was to adhere to this timeline surrounding Tar-Telperiën, the Númenorians would not answer that call until 1700 SA, 5 years later, when Minnistir, her nephew, whom she may have appointed regent and captain of the Númenorian colonies of MiddleEarth, sent forth the great Númenorian navy, captained by the great admiral Ciryatur. Alternatively, it is said, in another timeline, Minnistir did send his naval fleet in 1695 SA, when Gil-galad called for aid, and it even referred to Minnistir in 1700 SA as king, but that is something we'll talk about later on. Now, it's my belief the Númenorian colonies, primarily established around the time of Tar-Aldarien, would hold true to the alliance of men and elves in 1695 SA, with or without the blessing of Tar-Telperiën, and would have come to the aid of Elroth in Eregion and the Westlands, even though it was a losing battle, and by 1699 SA, Sauron had overrun Eriador. In any case, we know Minnistir sent a large Númenorian force between this time, but, based on all accounts, definitely in 1700 SA, and helped turn the tide and force back Sauron's invading forces, and by 1701 SA, the first major conflict with Sauron had ended, although it came at a great price, and the peace would not last. Whatever timeline you choose to follow, whether the Númenorian colonies helped the Elves in 1695 SA without the blessing of Tar-Telperiën, or Minnistir sent his fleet in 1695 SA or 1700 SA to aid Gil-galad and his forces, in the end, the Númenorians came to the aid of the Elves and folk of MiddleEarth, and victory was achieved. And although Tar-Telperiën is said to have little or no hand in these achievements, I like to imagine that Minnistir would not have been allowed to use the naval fleet without her permission, so I like to think good of her and give her some credit. Tar-Telperiën ruled for 175 years and was described as a proud and willful ruler, and was eventually succeeded by her nephew Minnistir. In fact, she held on to the scepter until the year of her death in 1731 SA. Tar-Telperiën was long-lived, dying at the age of 411. She refused to marry and so died without an heir, and it has been remarked too, she was reluctant to give up her power. But that I feel is an assumption, as she did hand over the scepter before her death. I was surprised to discover so many conflicting pieces of information when it came to the time period of her rule and when she stepped down as queen. Some versions of the legendarium, such as the Tales of Years and the history of Galadriel and Celebrimbor, mentioned Minnistir as king in 1700 SA, which I mentioned before, which conflicts directly with the line of Elros. Not even Christopher Tolkien could account for these discrepancies. we might conjecture that Ministir was acting as regent or general for Tar-Telperiën, which is what I used in my preferred version. This helps, in my opinion, the timeline fit in respect of Tar-Telperien's reign until 1731 SA. We can assume the mention of Tar Ministir, the king, in 1700 SA actually means Tar Ministir, who later became king. It's an awkward accommodation and can cause much confusion, but it seems to correct many things. In any case, I have decided to use this version and adhere to the line of Elrust set down in the Unfinished Tales as my reference. There is so much I haven't spoken about, and so many events that deserve their own video. It is so tempting to get drawn away from the Númenorian people and explore the ever-changing world of Middle-earth. But I am fixed to my cause, and I have so much more coming your way, especially in respect of the Númenorian culture and traditions, which I think you will really enjoy. I truly appreciate all the support, and please feel free to comment below if you have any questions or insight. As always, I hope you enjoyed this, and thank you very much, and may the light of Eärendil guide your way.